Hi, thank you so much for joining us for the celebration of our release Daylighting, which is officially out today. And we're very happy to be sharing it with everybody. And at any time, you can check it out on Bandcamp or Spotify or anywhere and take a listen. And we would be super appreciative of that. This is actually pre-recorded because we are sufficiently tired of battling with technology, but we're trying to keep the live flavor to it as much as possible. Yeah, so thanks so much for tuning in.
And today we wanted to talk a little bit about what daylighting has meant to us, and then also focus a little bit on our collaboration that was a gift that came along with the album. So the project of the film, dance film with Tori Lawrence.
Yeah. So just to talk a bit about what this project is and where it comes from, I feel a bit like it is a follow-up to our last album, Vis-a-Vis, in that it's this composed body of work as an album that we've made, and it's focusing on these instruments that we're creating. And so the instruments combine textiles and electronics in this sort of strange way that we've had the pleasure of exploring for the past year or so. And the whole process of creating the thing started, I guess, in about April 2020, about at the same time that we had released Vis-a-Vis. We just immediately started working on this. And it's been really fun to dive into these instruments specifically and then to record the music. In a sense, even though our last album was released during the pandemic, this was the album we made during the entirety of the pandemic. So it had a very kind of introverted approach. We didn't, we only started performing it live very recently because that was the first time it was a possibility. So it's also been fun to explore how we can start to perform it live too.
Yeah, that's a new phase for the project. But the start of the project didn't even start actually from the instruments necessarily, even though the instruments became the essence of it. But we were fascinated by the idea of creating a different kind of atmosphere, universe than Vis-a-Vis, and also to use a different format. So in this case, we are not releasing on vinyl and we are releasing on tape.
Yeah. And another thread that connects the two albums was this, by chance, I guess, gift of being able to also try to create the design and think about the visual approach of what the album is going to be as an object. So in this case, we were also able to make the design ourselves and explore this idea of using risograph to print, which was really fun. Yeah.
And so, of course, at the start of every discographic project for us, there's a lot of exchange with our partners in China. So anyone who is always happy to support our crazy ideas. So they took us on an inspiration trip. We visited Yunnan in May of last year, and that was a sort of initial phase to start with the composition, just the musical actual ideas and the musical material. And for that, actually we already had two of the instruments, right? So we had, while in residency at the Swatch Art Peace Hotel, we had built the phasisynth and the liminaphone. So how did that happen, Chris?
Yeah, so it was just at the start of the lockdown, basically. And just down the street from the Swatch Art Peace Hotel, which is basically in the middle of Shanghai, like right in the center of the city, very busy place. There is a 7-floor electronic component store, so you can get everything there to build anything you want. And because we were just coming off of this vis-a-vis project, which was the first time we were trying to build our own instruments from scratch, the computer was like a third performer in that piece still. So I started to think, what would it take to build instead electronic instruments from scratch? And of course, a lot of people are doing this already and building their own synthesizers in this kind of do-it-yourself way. And so with all of the time we had in this kind of more introverted sense of just being inside in a studio, it was fun to start experimenting with building electronic instruments. So we just kind of set out to make something. And then the textile part came into play because also anyone kind of hooked us up with this fashion brand that wanted to collaborate in some way. And so we finally decided to try to make something that could make use of their textiles in the instruments we were already building.
Yeah, but that was actually already a fertile ground for the textiles because of all the inspiration that we had previously had with all the encounters of textile artists at different residencies, and came along also with a lot of research on all the experiments and actual work of so many people who work with e-textiles. That is a very, very interesting and we believe promising scene of experimentation in general.
Yeah, and instead the music kind of came out of the instruments themselves because in a sense they have really strong limitations in the same way that some of the other instruments we have built do. And we also paired these synthesizers with some small percussion instruments that gave another set of limitations. So all these limitations collected together kind of give this very minimal ingredients to work with and rearrange to make pieces out of.
I'd say. Yeah. And probably besides the music itself, the instruments and the videos, the last part is the design of the cassette and the whole project, which has yet again different elements in it because of course it recalls strongly a certain kind of, let's say, language that you can see in common with vis-a-vis design, but then we kind of join different kind of inspirations, one coming from the machines. So this coding tool that we found, and we thought it was really fun to try out, which is called Turtle Toy. And the other inspiration instead is textile based, and it's because we are really fascinated by the work of Annie Albers and all of her, mainly the weaving work, let's say. And so there was one specific work that you can see we pay homage to, let's say. Yeah. And then for a long time, we had talked with anyone about risograph as a very interesting printing technique. And super specific, of course, because you need the machine, etc. But we thought it was, it happened to be an interesting technique to explore right now. And so that's how we got in contact with Concretipo in Florence, who printed it for us.
We're very happy with how the album came out. And even if this is pre-recorded, we are here in the chat and are very happy to speak with anybody who is here right now. Starting now, we're going to stream the film that Tori Lawrence made with two of the tracks from our album, Plainness and Daylighting, with the dancer Jungwon Kim. And we're very happy to share this. And then after that, we will have a short chat with her to talk about her practice and how this film came about and everything else. And yeah, stay with us. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Hi, Tori. Thanks for joining us. We are super happy that we are not alone celebrating this day of the release. So this is also the first time that we actually meet because we only wrote emails to each other. So we wanted to just ask you maybe to introduce yourself and your work just a little bit as you want.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm a choreographer and filmmaker based in the US. I'm currently living in Western Massachusetts and starting up a residency space here with some friends. And so that's been a lot of my focus this spring and summer. And but the majority of my artistic work is site specific, site oriented, and I create these durational experiences where the audience isn't necessarily seated, but they're sort of following the performance as it happens, and it integrates music and visual art and other designers into the work. So it's not just movement, but it's really this like full immersive experience. And from there, I got into filmmaking, digital filmmaking, and then now I'm moving more into analog filmmaking, like 16 millimeter and Super 8, and sort of like, yeah, I'm always trying to find new media to integrate into my practice. And I do that a lot through collaborations, but also like myself, I feel like I'm just a continuous student and always inspired by so many things. So, yeah.
Yeah. So we found the first time your work in the wild, into the wild, and I think we were just like super like immediately struck by it, and that's why we wrote to you like years ago, I guess already. And like the more we follow you, the more we like see this kind of parallelisms between your interests and our interests, like all this multidisciplinarity approach and like even this passage between digital and analog, which I guess is like common to many filmmakers and so on. But yeah, so I think it will be interesting to like discuss different things like this.
Yeah, we definitely also feel like people who are always trying to learn new things, and then as soon as we learn them, we feel this need to just put them into our own work in some way. Yeah. And we've also moved a bit more in this analog direction in the last year or so. But I wonder what it's like for you to look at this digital material now after really diving into that.
Yeah, maybe we can actually go all the way back to how did this movie this film that is now called Daylighting started at all? Because it was not super expressly filmed for our album, so I think it's very interesting.
Maybe it has a longer history than our actual album, I think.
Yeah. Well, I filmed it 3 years ago during a residency in Southern Oregon. So the high desert, they call it the Oregon Outback, and there's a lot of desert lakes there that during some seasons they have about like a foot of water on them. And I was there working with collaborators Jung Kim and Ellie Gowdy Averill, and we were sort of starting this movement research for a live performance that I was making called Junk Space. And I was also shooting some other film work with Ellie, but then there was one day where Jung and I are like, we have one day left at this residency. Like, can we just do a collaboration together with film and dance? And I was like, yes, I was just about to ask you actually. And so I had this sort of like indigo fabric that like a resident artist there had dyed for me. And I was like, well, how about we wear this? And we had some initial, like I had some like initial designs or images that I was thinking to sort of start from. But a lot of the work was improvised, and Jung is majority like a contact improviser, but he's really great at performance improvisation. And I'm also an improviser, and we collaborate a lot with that within the work to create really like unique movement material. And so, so with that, we had a few scores in mind, but he was improvising on the playa, and I was improvising the camera. And it sort of became this like durational duet. We didn't really know how long we would go for or where we would end up. So a lot of the things were surprises. And then I never really edited the footage. And then and then you two had contacted me, and like I've always wanted to work with you, and but then the pandemic happened and it sort of like stopped live performance for a bit. So then I started going back into my film work, thinking like, oh, maybe I should edit these pieces. And with a couple of your tracks within daylighting, I was thinking that the material might really sit well with it. And so yeah, so it was interesting to collaborate with you, even though the footage is 3 years old. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's basically I feel like there's kind of three characters in this movie. There's like Hugh, the dancer, and the camera. That's how.
Yeah.
And maybe in the landscape. Maybe in the.
Yeah. So, for example, for us, the musical instruments were like the starting point for the album. So I wonder if you have some specific thoughts about the camera that I guess then was just it was the digital camera, but like do you have limitations of some kind when you're using the camera with the dancer? And yeah, like how do you feel about it? Are you ever frustrated at it or whatever?
Yeah, I think the limitations I have are its weight. It's just so heavy, and so I'm trying to always find a way within my body to sort of like hold the camera so it's just breathing the dancer. And luckily, a lot of the material that Jungwon was working with was really minimal and didn't really travel a whole lot, or it was like very expansive from like one static image that continuously moves or like disappears into the end. And so I was using a lot of static movement, but it was handheld within a gimbal, and so I was just trying to barely move, and then sometimes frame him by just arcing around and sort of keeping the movement really sort of center frame, and yeah, just really trying to just be this sort of breathing onlooker. Yeah.
And so originally your background is in dance then, or in film, or is it a mix? Like how did you come to where you are now in that sense?
Yeah. Well, I feel like I identify primarily as a choreographer, and most choreographers that I know, or I think all choreographers really are dancers too. And so I'm constantly training, but I never really put myself into my own work. I always work with a variety of collaborators, and it really differs project to project. And but from choreography and sight work and working with other filmmakers, I was inspired to make dance films. And through just not really ever having a budget, I learned all the filmmaking myself. And then gradually, when I was in graduate school for choreography, I took some more classes and met some more filmmaking friends, and I've just been learning through friends and mentors. And I feel like it's a really good way for me to distribute my work, because sometimes my site work, it's really impossible to get to, or I might have like a limited duration there. I don't really know the community, and so I'll film it as a way to archive and share it. But yeah, always a choreographer and sometimes filmmaker. Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, to learn all of that completely on your own. Huh?
Yeah. And I think the approach to the filmmaking, even if we are way less professional, but it's very similar in the scope for us, for the video we make. You said documentation and sharing. So that's also what we do with ours. But because you mentioned the fourth character is the landscape, and I feel like in like your artist statement and your whole work, like place and space and landscape or architecture in all different ways that happen is like super central. And somehow it's super central for us because we are moving all the time and we get inspiration from it, but we like cannot express it that well, I think, or like we are more all over the place. But it's like super fascinating. And like how do you get into how do you choose a place, get into a place and get familiar or not familiar with it? Like what kind of approach do you usually want or seek or hope to find with this place? Like, is it always different? Is it always the same? And is it an ongoing research that you have, or very many different ones and so on? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think typically through living in a space, like I move a lot. Pretty much every year I'm living in a different state, or I go to residencies that take me away, just like you guys. And I feel like I've always been this a personality that sort of like doesn't really talk very much. I really observe a lot, and with that I've observed the land, I observe people in land, I observe movement in the land, and through my work I like to create these really like fantastical environments that you can kind of like escape the norm just a bit slightly. And as I don't know, for a bunch of reasons, sometimes I'm trying to like comment on something, like a lot of my work currently is like a comment on modernization and sort of the constant updating of buildings or designs or things, because maybe they're not quite efficient anymore, or don't really serve an efficient use. And so I'm just looking at that in terms of, I don't know, I feel this like empathy or sadness for the land or sadness for buildings. And maybe that's just me projecting myself onto them. But I like to use work as a way to invite audience members via live or during films to sort of like re-experience things that they may assume they have a certain connection with, and to sort of like experience it in a new way by just shifting something just a little bit slightly, and creating a different world from the same world, like sort of in a way of like just I upcycle things. I reuse things and create something different out of them.
How many films did you make during that residency? Because I feel like I recognize the landscape in a lot of your work, and you must have been really busy. Or like, how long was the residency? What was it like?
It was, yeah. It was just a month.
Wow.
Yeah. I have this like ongoing film with one of the dancers, Ellie, and we'd been working it over many years, and it was always this unfinished product. It was the one with the cube.
Plop, right?
Plop, yeah. And so that one, we sort of, whenever I was at a residency or a road trip or anywhere, we would sort of have that cube and that outfit, and we would say, okay, we're getting out of the car, we're gonna camp here, we're gonna film. So that film has a lot of different landscapes in it. And then yeah, I was very busy during that residency. I was very busy. But this piece with Jung-Woong, it was one afternoon, and we didn't really think anything would really come of it. It was just an experiment for the two of us, but I'm really happy that we made all that material, and then now that we could partner it with you guys. Yeah.
Well, we're extremely grateful too. So yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So because you have like an overall vision for also costumes and music and so on, maybe I have an obvious question of how do you usually think about the sound, the music or the sound for your films?
Yeah, I would say it depends on the project, but some of my current site work, for instance, like this piece Junk Space that I was working on until the pandemic, a lot of it came from the environmental sounds and trying to just enhance them a bit, or slightly abstract them so that people could be fooled that was from the space, naturally from the space. And so one was in a factory, and then another one that we did was in a small farm in southern Sweden. And so with the farm, we sort of were, with the musicians, we were trying to find ways to install the sound into the house, into the farm, into a car, into the fields. And so some of it, we would take sort of some of the natural sounds that were there and sort of like enhance them with the instruments that we did have, or microphones, or lawnmowers, or just like anything. And just try to create this like more pronounced landscape, more loud, more grit, more, I don't know, and then create these like beautiful things out of them as well. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Yeah. So it never seems like there's this like overlaid thing that doesn't fit. It's this very like, oh yeah, of course. That's what I like to make. Yeah. And I think that makes sense because I'm really also getting into Foley.
Yeah.
So I've been shooting a lot of like 16mm and Super 8 work, and it doesn't record the sound. And so now we've been getting like contact microphones and trying to create the sounds live as the film is screened. And then I was like, oh, couldn't I do Foley for live performance too? And so like with Junk Space within like a theater studio setting, we've been putting contact microphones like in shoes and tables and chairs and things. And so that like you're really hearing a lot more than you should. Yeah, it's just been interesting.
Yeah, I love that. We've toyed with similar ideas of using Foley in performance, but they never quite materialized into anything. But yeah, I absolutely love that.
So maybe a random question. If you were to shoot again in the very same circumstances, what is now daylighting with Jongwon, but with the analog camera, what do you think would have happened, or like how is it different?
Well, the first thing immediately that I could think of is the duration aspect of it would not be like it is because of how expensive film is. And so I'm pretty like budget oriented when I'm filming, of like, okay, that's enough. Oh, you know, because it's like $30 to $40 for 3 minutes of footage. Yeah. And so like I might have improvised maybe a bit less or sculpted it a bit more of the frame, so I would know exactly what the movement is doing from the beginning to the end. And I feel like I would have been with him a little bit less with his durational escapes or entrances. Yeah, and in terms of lighting, that might have shifted some of the things of how it was stylized too. I don't know. I'm also pretty like a novice analog filmmaker, so I don't know what would have turned out.
Great. You have other questions?
No, I don't think so. But yeah.
So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it was super lovely to discuss some art ideas. And we hope we'll meet. We have plans
in person someday.
In person. Yeah.
So we'll talk soon. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks.